Hi everyone, welcome to Ancestry Unpacked for July 2026. I'm Fiona Brooker.
And I'm Michelle Patient, and I'm in winter, and you are in summer.
I'm up over for this session that we're recording. So today I'm going to be jumping in and having a little bit of a chat about the England and Wales Tithe apportionments. So, popping up in our card catalogue as a brand new set was this fantastic 14 million records or people almost collection of the English and Wales tithe apportionments. And I have to say, I was pretty excited to see these because I love a good land record. And so, for those of us that have a number of ancestors that are perhaps farming or working on the land, these are the sort of records that you want to see appearing. Now, just so that you know a little bit about them, what do you always do when you see a new collection of records? And we've told you this before, is you scroll down because you do want to understand what these records contain and what these records are telling you. Now, the tithe apportionments were sort of around 1836 that these start. So you're sort of looking at that period, 1836 to probably through to about 1851, as far as the records are being created. But then there are amendments that go on after that as well. We're going to look at some of these in a little bit more detail in a moment. But again, as I say, drop down and you'll find there's a wee bibliography there, including links to a research guide that is on the National Archives website about the tithe records in detail. So it's really good to go back to where those records come from, because sometimes there are guides on the websites that host the records originally, but it's also fantastic that Ancestry make these available so that we can actually view them from home. Because although I am in the UK at the moment, I'm not going to get to go to National Archives this time. And like many of you, even being in the UK is a special event rather than an everyday event. So if you are coming to these later on, so I've come at these from the card catalogue, but you want to get to these in the future, they are within the collection or the sort of the group of records of convict, criminal, land, and wills. So if you're in your normal search screen, you can get to them via that. Just remember that you want to make sure you're looking for either United Kingdom, England, or Wales to find that collection to come up. If you're searching and it's looking for Australian records or New Zealand records, they're not going to show as one of the searchable collections straight away. So just remember that as an extra added tip. So I thought, being that I'm about to head down to Devon to do some research, I would look at one of my Devon families. And so I've put in George Havel here. And you can see when the family tree has filled up for me, it's actually given me 3 George Havels, because they like to name after each other. So let's look and see what I find for George Havel. So here on the screen, I've got some results. I've got 11 results appearing here. 10 of them are sort of duplicates of each other. So there's a 5 set and a 5 set that you can see there. And then there's one at the very bottom, which is a different variation on the spelling of Havel and is unrelated to my family at the moment anyway. So when you're looking at these, you'll see one set has got a residence date and a residence place, and the second set doesn't have that residence date and residence place. And that is why, because in these records, we have both the owner of the land and we have the occupier of the land. And so the ones that have got the residence date and residence place are the occupiers, the other ones are the owners. So just so you know the difference and why you're not getting that information showing on every record. But you can see with the numbering, the place on the map is the same for 2 lines. So there's a 482 for both George Havel Jr. in 1843 and a 482 for George Havel Jr. further down the screen. So let's have a look when we jump into this. So as soon as you get into this and you are viewing the record as such, you get a little bit more information. We're looking at the slightly newer screen. It's been around a wee while now, but it still looks different every time I look at it. I don't know about you, Michelle. I have to think just for a moment, but I will get used to it. So here we have a little bit more information. We have that he's in 1843 in Heavitree in Devon, so that's looking really good. He's looking like mine. He's an occupier, as I said, occupier compared to owner. Place on the map and a little short description. I'm going to be coming back to that description when I'm looking at the live records with you in a moment. And as we scroll down, as I said, here you can see the roles, the individuals listed against that site, an occupier and a landowner. So let's go live to look at that record. So here we are in the live system now so that I can show you these records in a little bit more detail. So again, as I was just showing you on the screenshots, here is my record. I have the ability as normal to be able to save this record to my family tree. But I am going to need to do a little bit of research into this because obviously this is George Havel, but as I did just show you, there are multiple George Havels in my family tree. So I may have to not just jump into the fact that down here I've got George Havel Jr. and I've got George Havel Sr. I may need to go and do a little bit of research as to which one it actually is. But let's look at the column headings first of all. So starting across the top, we've got landowners and occupiers. We've got the number referring to the plan, and I'll explain what that is all about soon. We have the name and description of the land and premises. And you can see in this first one, for example, you've got church house, you've got an almshouse, you've got a chapel park, house and garden, Southfield, etc. Now, to be fair, this is the trustees of Heavitree, so we're probably looking at the church. We've got what state it is in, as in how it is being farmed. Is it pasture, arable, etc.? We've got how big it is in acres, roods, and perches, and then we have how much is payable to the vicar. Because what these tithes were all about was how much money was effectively being taxed on the owners and the renters of the land to be paid to the church to help run the parish. So you'll see payable to the vicar, payable to appropriators or their lessees. In this case, I've also got a note there, Richard Collins. More information to go and have a look at. So lots of information there on the size of the land. And that's really useful because you can look then and compare it to sort of how are the neighbours, how big are the neighbours' ones? Do they have lots of land? Do they have a little bit of land? So let's jump down to look at George. And here he is down here. So he has got 4 different sections of land. He's got houses, he's got a house and garden, he's got an orchard, and he's got a house and orchard. He would appear to be doing quite well for himself at this stage. George Havel Sr. also has Havel's Meadow. Now, I really want to go and find that now. So I will be looking at some contemporary maps to see if that is named on any other maps beyond the maps for the tithe. And you can see that these records also include women. So it's not just a very man-heavy record. It is going to be predominantly, but there are women listed as well. She is both owner and occupier, and she has a garden, a house and yard, and a house and garden. Again, we scroll over and we can see the sizes of these, not incredibly big. The meadow is almost bigger than all the other land that George is owning and occupying. So a nice way of getting in to have a look at these. But the other thing you can do from these is jump to sort of the other supporting records as well. So thinking about, right, so if I'm finding George here, and these records, if we look at the detail for them, are 1843. We're nicely between the 41 and 51 census records. So we can go further and have a bit of look at those to see if they support what I'm finding. So I've already found George in these records to show you today. Here is one George Havel. He's a butcher. You have to actually go across to find out where he's living, which is South Wanford. And you'll find that down a little bit further in the next door sort of house, there is the younger George Havel working as an ag lab. So you may find that somebody may own the land, but not necessarily be living on the land. So you've got to be aware of where they could be living in comparison to where they might be working as well or occupying. If I jump through to the 1851 census, again, I've got George in South Wanford. He's now married, has a huge family. He's still a butcher and master. They were all butchers as well, just to make sure I'm really confused about all my Georges. But nicely, living next door to him in the 1850 census is Mary Hooper. So now I'm starting to get a feel that where I'm seeing him in the census is probably also where he's living based on those tithe apportionment records as well. So a really useful piece of information to be able to tie up and have a look at and go further with. Now, one thing I wanted to check with you about these, and in fact, I'm going to go back before I do that. Have a good look around. Use the film strip and jump right to the start of the records for Devon, because you will find information out. Sorry, find my tithe record again. Go to the start of the tithe records as well. Census records are also worthwhile, but go to the start of the tithe records and read what is on these tithe records, because it gives you more information about dates. It gives you more information about what is happening with the land. In this case, George Lewis writes a whole lot of stuff about the type of land, whether it's arable, whether it's pasture, gardens, etc. There's sort of summary pages of how much land is available, what's happening. So have a really good look around these records as well, because you may find that there's more information that supports, that tells more of the story of your families, etc. Now, the big thing about these, though, is not all of them have their maps at this stage. I'm hopeful that the maps will appear for more than what is available on my Devon one, so I can see those maps. But you can browse the collection. If you browse the collection, and in this case, I've chose Bedfordshire, I've gone to Dunstable and Bedfordshire, I'll see that there's both an apportionment register and a tithe map. Some of the other places, and I bet if I choose this one, it will have the tithe maps. Some of them you'll find it just says an apportionment register at this stage. So do have a bit of a look around, because you may find that some of your parishes have it, some of your parishes don't, some of your counties have them, some of them don't. So just be aware of that, because you do want to be able to find those maps at some stage. So if I look at Dunstable, and here is the part of the Dunstable apportionment register. Here's somebody called Richard Gutteridge. He has a lot of land. So he has a lot of sections that looked really interesting to find. And each of these sections has a number, 6, 14, 16, etc. going down. I can then use those by opening the maps in another screen and look at the numbers on these sections here, because that is actually showing me the land, the meadows, the paddocks, the house and garden, etc., that Richard was actually either owning or occupying. So you want to look and see if you can find maps for your parish or your town, etc., as well. Now, these maps are quite big, so they have been photographed in sections. So you'll see that my sections for this one, there's 3 sections, because I'm on page 2 of 3. The other tool that you may find really useful to use with these, and if I jump to this one over here, you will find that some of the words don't read as such. So have a look at your tools section, and you'll find the ability to rotate left, rotate right, etc., which can be really useful if you're trying to read those little numbers. But it does help when you start looking at these, because, for example, if I come back here, he had a paddock called the Windmill Meadow on number 65, and the Windmill and Road on number 66, and the mill field, etc. And if I look at this map and look for 65 and 66, here's 65, here's the windmill, here's 66, the little piece of land with the windmill on it. So you're getting down into really little details here as well. So have a good look around, have a bit of a play, use them from both the index and also the browsable part of these to see what maps are available. What about you, Michelle? Are you looking forward to having a play?
I am, because I last did my tithe map research actually at the Essex Record Office, possibly 20 years ago, and they're amazing and they're so useful. But I certainly have now got the opportunity to add them into my tree more successfully than the very poor photography I did with something that wasn't a phone 20 years ago. So yeah,
And
I'm
I
really
love
glad
that
these have
for
turned
some of
up.
these country towns, you're actually able to sort of get a bit of an idea of who's living in some of the streets and who's owning the paddocks behind them and things like that as well. And that may
Some
lead
of
to a
mine may,
whole lot of other records
yeah,
too.
some of mine had that names handwritten of the occupiers. So it just depends on the time frame, the kind of detail you get. So these are fantastic. Really pleased they're available.
Now, don't forget that a lot of these records are rurally based. They're not, you're not looking at the big cities, etc. But just remember, some of the outskirts of the big cities were rural at the time. So you may find something like, for example, West Bromwich may well now be pretty much part of Birmingham, but actually at the time of these records being taken was its own entity. So go and have a bit of a look, have a little search around and see what you may find. Good luck with that.
So it's funny because often Fiona and I don't have a lot of planning ahead because we're working on things and it's what we feel is really interesting right now. And I've been really focused on noticing many people out there are feeling not quite as organised as they'd like. And so I'll have a tip about your session on tithe maps further down the track as well in my slides. So I want to talk about keeping yourself a bit more organised. I'm going to cover three different areas of the website, something about your legacy contact, which I'm not sure everybody's thought about doing yet, a bit about your new DNA records, following on from the last tip I did, and how to keep yourself a bit up to date, particularly when records like we've just been watching are being updated as we speak. So let's have, and into the future. So the first thing is, life isn't always the way we'd like it to be, and we should be thinking about who will legally have access to our records later. And in the old days, you used to have to write some legalese in your will to hand on to meet the terms and conditions of various companies. The great thing is that in the last, I think it was well over 12 months ago now, Ancestry added a legacy feature to their account settings. So you now can nominate within your account who you want to have legal access to. Because a reminder to all of you that it is a breach of terms and conditions to share your login and your password. And so if you have unfortunately got a relative's access details because they've passed away and you try to pay a sub or renew things, you'll actually find you're not able to unless you have the legal right to do so. And the easiest way now, rather than your lawyers adding a letter to your will, is actually to choose account settings in your profile. And as we always say, scroll down. And if you scroll down, you'll see this box that says legacy contact. And in my case, my legatee is my husband, but you may find it's a niece or a nephew or the person who is most interested in your family history that you plan to leave it to. So that's my first tip, really, because I've been noticing these things a lot. Had a few too many deaths in the family this year, that these things are at the top of my mind. And I thought it's probably time it's at top of yours too, because I know many people didn't know this existed. I literally was chatting about it in a Facebook group this week, and people there hadn't realised it was available. And not all of us are as organised as we'd like to be. And so I'm hoping everyone out there has some form of regular backup process. So whether that's the fact that you sit down every Tuesday morning and you have a portable drive and you back your computer up to it, or you, for Ancestry, use Family Tree Maker or Roots Magic, which both synchronise with your online tree, you need to make a date with yourself to make sure you're keeping yourself up to date and backed up. And just like Fiona showed you with those tithe map records, which are just a goldmine of information for social context as well, to compare what was the environment like that your ancestors were living in at that time, to get a full grasp of the neighbourhood. And how often is it some relative next door that you didn't realise you had next door, which is what my first eye opener was, over 20 years ago now, which helped me crack through a few brick walls of people who'd been misindexed because there they were living next door. So set yourself a date to check what's been updated since you last looked at the Ancestry website. And how do you do that? So here's the card catalogue. So if you click on search, and the last thing in the drop-down menu is card catalogue. Again, we're focusing on the UK, even though we didn't discuss it first. Here is the UK one. You'll see it's ticked on the left. And so it's highlighted because I've gone to the UK server because my focus for research is the UK. So I get a list in the card catalogue, and you'll notice in the top right it says the date updated. I'll make sure in the show notes for this recording under YouTube, there'll be a link for each major English speaking region of servers. So whether you're using Australia, Canada, or the UK, you will automatically can click on the links in our notes and it'll take you to the updated catalogue list. If you look at it, you'll see there's 2,208 data sets that are in this list of recently updated. If I head over and untick that box, all up, there's the 33,949 set, and there's 25 of them have just been updated. I actually covered an example of this in the news a couple of weeks ago. So if you haven't watched our news episode from the 19th of June, please go and see me live, find out that, good heavens, I actually had, in this update, I had records that weren't there before for my child's day. And the other thing about using that version is that you'll be able to check for the updates in the tithe maps too. But what's another way you can do that? Well, if again, going to your profile, and before I was on the top link, your account, you'll notice further down there's a tree option. And as usual, scroll down, and there's a scroll down, and you can make sure the new hint indicator at the top of the page, and you can choose it for which tree you have. And so for me, I don't want the other hints, which is why they're off. And I'm just using the tree I'm doing most of my work on, is the only one I actually have ticked for the new hint indicator. And that means that when new records are updated and now match information in my tree, they're going to turn up in that shaky leaf on the very top right-hand corner of your screen. That's really helpful because it means I don't necessarily have a date in my calendar for me to look every month. Because the way I work anyway, I'm checking the news and the latest things on a regular basis so I can report to you guys. But you at home might like to make a date with yourself in your calendar, whether it's once a month, once every 2 months, or every quarter, on specific people that are your brick walls. What am I going to go and check out? What card catalogue updates do I need to see have changed? And how am I going to make sure that I double check the tithe maps have become searchable for my county and my parish if they currently aren't? So I hope that helps you keep up to date in terms of records. But the other thing is too, is most of us out there have done DNA, and many of us sometimes find the list of people in our matches quite overwhelming and more than enough to cope with. And so I'm hoping you've all noticed there's a couple of different ways of incorporating them into your tree, so you know you've looked at that match and worked with them. And I thought I'd just show you a couple of those. So first off, looking at the whole screen, I hope you've noticed the little green dot. The little green dot means this is a new match to me. Now I tend to look here at the full list, and if they're in that top so many in my list and I see a green dot, that's the one that I go and work with. But like most things in computing, there's more than one way to skin a cat, more than one way to do these things. Computers seem to have about 5 ways to do the same thing, some easier than others, some the way my brain works and some the way your brain works. So in view of that, I will show you another way to keep in touch. You can look at your full match list, click on the filter option, and you'll see on the right-hand page a tick box next to new, so you can see all those new to you matches. Because I can tell you I've only got the one that's close, that's the one I'm going to use as my example. And of course, more matches turn up because of the Christmas sales, and those test results literally start turning up. I usually find late March, but they start to turn up after sales at Easter as well, and they start sales after Father's Day and Mother's Day. So I just find I've gone from 36 matches to I've stopped counting when I first got my DNA results in 2015. So if I want to add this person to my tree, and I already know who this person is, and I know she's the daughter of my aunt, and I know that I actually have this person already as a person in my tree, then it's easy to deal with. I literally just compress the connect to tree button, and a side menu will turn up for me to work in. And because of privacy, I'm not going to do all of this live for you. I have too many people with the same first name, and their privacy will be revealed. So just imagine I've typed the first 3 letters of her name in. I've seen a list of people and I've selected the correct one. And when I've done that, it looks like this, that right-hand box, and I can see their details, and I have a new icon now. I have that blue DNA icon against her. If I wanted to, I could go and view her in the tree and do some more work, or maybe not. But what am I going to do if this match that's turned up isn't in my tree? How can I add them? Again, there's more than one way. I'm just going to show you one today. The easiest workaround is to add them to somebody and then unlink them and do your research to find how they connect. So here we go with, I can just use myself because I can remember where I am in the tree. Some people have trouble finding themselves again, but here I am. And I can go to this right-hand side. And again, there's even more than one way to do this, but I'm showing you this way. And I can add a family member. So I remember the gender of the person that is a DNA match, but I haven't got all their details in the tree. And I choose the correct gender and make them a, child of mine. And when I've added them as a child, you're going to use the actual name details, but I'm using this again as an example for you guys. So you put their first name and their last name. And the other tip that I learned from Angie Bush many years ago now that I've always been grateful for is I put the centimorgan amount in the suffix field. Ancestry tell us that this field is not used for things that will affect the algorithms of finding hints or working in our tree and all the background, that it's perfectly safe for us to put this data here. If you happen to have matches at another company site, I put them in here with the initial of where the source is as well. So you may find if you're adding somebody that's tested at a different place, this is also a useful way of keeping all your DNA data into one tree. You can use the suffix field there. So don't forget, you can put multiple, and I do multiple for siblings. So at the moment I'm working on a case with 3 siblings. I put their initial first and then their amount. I put them in alphabetical order, so it's always in my brain that it's the same order. I put the centimorgan amount for all 3. And that's because of the other tools I use afterwards. But it also always gives me a jog of a rough idea of how far back I need to research and build the person's tree, because I have an idea of how distantly related they must be based on that centimorgan amount. So once I've actually saved that person, the good thing is we now have this dialog box pop up, which has an active link in it. So now I don't have to remember their name, or I can just literally click on that active link. Because the first thing I must do is unlink them from me, so they then become the start of a floating branch, so that I can then do my own research back to find how they connect to my existing people in my tree. So in this case, I need to now head up to the top right where it says Edit and choose Edit Relationships, because I added this person as a child of me. In fact, I think I picked a male from memory. You'll see if I click on that Edit Relationships, it's showing that Tony and I had children, which we weren't able to. So I need to remove them and then actually get on with doing family history. So if I press the X next to the biological, I'll get this menu that says, do I really want to do this? So it's protecting me from making a mistake. Well, in this case, I definitely want to unlink them, and I do it for both myself and Tony, so there's no mother or father for this person, and you'll end up with a screen like this. Then I come back and use the My Tree tags. Now, in my case, I always put the DNA match in here, even though I know they're going to be linked to the tree in the same process I just showed you for the previous person that was already in the tree, because now this person's there, I can go to my DNA matches and link them. But I do one more thing. I've made a custom tag, tells me I need to build this tree backwards. And I bet you all don't always finish what you start out doing. You get some sort of life interruption, or you just don't have any more time that day or evening. To me, it's important to do this so I don't lose where that floating branch is. I know that I can find this with the filters and come back to look for them. So I use two tags, my custom built one and the DNA match one. And if I forget where they are, the easy thing is I can just use the top right where it says find in the tree. And if I click on that, it will show me the people I most recently did, and I can just click on them. But if it might have been a little while and I've done a few other things, remember the filter button just there on the second area of the screen above me as the home person. If I click on that, I can scroll in to find the custom tags, and I can select the need to build back and therefore find all the people I still need to work on. The key is when you link them to the other people in your tree, remember to turn that tag off, because you don't need to do that work anymore. And for those of you that always like there's more than one way to do the same task, when you're in a tree view like this, so this is in a descendant view in my tree, you'll see down the bottom left, it shows me the people I most recently worked on. I had to blank a few out because they were actually living and I didn't want you to see those, but you get the idea. Sometimes you can easily find where you were last working because they're in the bottom left of the screen. And for some of that, that's not visible. You need to scroll down to find it. So there's two different ways of finding people you've recently worked on, with the top right filter or that bottom left screen. And then another tip is, because I do very focused research on specific card catalogue sections, sometimes I'm focusing solely on the UK, sometimes I'm focusing solely on my husband's family. So I should say I'm an Australian with an English father, an Australian mother, and a New Zealand husband. So I'm working with three different major areas of research in terms of location, a little bit of Irish and Swedish as well, and German on the side. The things I'm doing the most, I've actually made shortcuts in my web browser too. And that's a tip for all of you. I've even included how you can do it in a couple of other browsers. So you'll see on the bottom left, I'm often using the census and electoral collections, and I'm going to talk more about those in August. But I specifically often want to look only at the New Zealand card catalogue and only at the UK card catalogue, because by default, I always see just the Australian. I make sure I can readily go there without having to remember to tick boxes and jump through hoops. And the way to do that is on the right, you'll see it says add shortcut, and I'll get a pop-up box like this. You can create whatever words make sense to you, and you cut and paste the web address from the page you want to keep coming back to easily, or the collection, right in here and press done. So I'm hoping that's helpful to all of you, because it's already July. For many of us, it's cold. For many of you, it's way too hot. I hope those of you that are way too hot are in air-conditioned comfort and having time to research, and those of us that are way too cold are also staying indoors, keeping warm, and therefore doing more research. We're here every Friday with either a webinar or tips or news. And I'm Michelle, and you are
Fiona Brooker.
And we'd like to thank Ancestry for supporting us with this, and we'll see you next month.
Bye.
Week.